Okay, I am now broadcasting. FYI, I'm recording now. Okay, go ahead.
When they find out that they need so much more, or not as upset.
Oh yeah, yeah, they're paying twice as much. Yeah, at least, yeah. But for folks for whom money is just so not an issue, then yeah, whatever.
Yeah, when they put that policy in, just another higher.
You're fine, no worries. We'll start in a couple minutes online, folks.
So the first time I used the plugin, and it drew my lines, populated the conlink factor, and even labeled it.
Yep.
And I ran it. That's the unconstrained.
That's the unconstrained model. Grab the chi-square freedom. Yeah.
And I just highlighted it.
And it turned red again.
Well, it was blue.
Okay.
And then I.
And so what you want to do? No. So on the second time around, delete it, and then create a new one and label it CLF, and then run the plugin. So there are two expectations from that plugin. One is an unlabeled latent factor. One is a labeled unlatent factor.
But the plugin the first time labeled it for me.
Exactly.
So this time I'm labeling it manually.
And then it knows, oh, we're going the second time around, constrain all the paths.
Okay. So the second time around, create your conlink factor, label it manually.
If I were smart, I would have written it so that you could just hit the plugin again, even at this point.
Okay.
But I wasn't that smart.
But, okay, so I just created it again, and now I label it manually.
Yeah. Oh, I just thought programmatically how to do that. Well, for now, yeah, do that, but I'll fix it in the future so it's even easier.
Then run it again.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And that'll constrain all the paths. All right, we're missing just a couple people. They called and said they were going to be a few minutes late. I'm not terribly worried about time today, so we'll start in like 5 minutes. So if anyone needs some one-on-one help right now, I'm happy to.
These are size. I don't know about where you are.
You're going to show us
You know, let me write that in right now.
I think a lot of this.
Okay, there we go.
Say, hey, John, we're not doing anything with animals, we're not going to collect the original student. We know psychologist, so
you just wrote about running the game part of
What are you doing, CM? I already do this.
Ito para mute.
Yeah, so
So what you did is you moved them by accident. That's fine. What you can do is hit select them and then hit restart. And then it's like 20 bucks and resize it. Drag and resize inside. But you can drag and resize. And so it'll say 80 bucks. And if you do those circles to any lifts, that'll take into account errors. Or percent errors, but.
3 seconds, 2 hours.
I was thinking, talking about that, you know, like,
Yeah, we're actually going to do it. That's our first slide. Is OCD formatting.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So I actually had to fill out an employee questionnaire yesterday about disability. It was optional, but if I wanted to report a disability, OCD was listed as a disability.
Really?
Yeah. So I'm not diagnosed. I just make fun of it, but I should probably stop making fun of it because some people might be sensitive about it, I guess.
I am a licensed psychologist.
There we go.
Really? I
So
can diagnose you. Or you're not in Utah, but
uh,
I'm in Florida.
I'm good. I love Florida and all of it. The humidity and the gnats, I can't handle it.
We spray for this.
Yeah,
Winters are great.
that is true. Not as much snow though. All right, let's go ahead and get started, and we'll start with some non-critical content, so that those who are lagging behind won't miss out on the critical stuff. First off, we're going to do a little bit of OCD formatting. I had several requests to show you how to make models pretty, because they get really crazy messy, and the ones I make, they look like garbage. There we go. I know some of them look really nice, some of them look really awful. So the one I made yesterday looked real pretty like this, right? Yours didn't look like this, did it? Except Jim's. Jim's looked like this. So let me show you how to make it pretty. Let me take that ugly one we just had up. Let's see. This one. How can we make this pretty? Oof. Yeah. Oof. Well, ugh. This is going to be a hard one to demonstrate on. I have names in there, and it's all crowded. And so the first thing I'm going to do, I'm just going to move it all. You can try this. There's this little center on the page button. This button right here, it centers it on the page. But typically it shrinks it all, makes it real tiny. So I'm going to undo that. I'm going to kill all these covariance errors. This is driving me nuts. So give me just a sec. Okay. Can't double click them. No, they have their own really messy models that they can play with. There we go, almost there. I'm just deleting these because they're ugly, and I'm going to make them pretty on my side. Okay, so first thing first, I'm going to get rid of the CLF because it's going to complicate things terribly. I'm also going to get rid of this title. Okay, so we have a sort of a basic model here. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to separate things. If I hit the symmetries button, is the balloons and the fire truck. What that does is it allows me to move things symmetrically. So, in fact, before I do that, I better resize everything. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Plugins, Resize Observed Variables. That's going to make all of the boxes the exact same size. And now they're all overlapping. So that's lame. So let's fix that. Again, with truck and symmetries, you can push things apart a little bit, move them out a little bit. Like that. I'm going to move these apart. There we go. Got some room to work with. Oh, there are only two of these. And then those ones apart. So we're already looking a little bit better. Okay. Let me now move these roughly to the right location. Okay, now let me show you a really cool tool. It is, yikes. If you select all with the open hand,
and then try to resize with the blue arrow box. If you try to resize any box, it'll resize all boxes. So I'm going to do that, resize those boxes to how I want them. There we go. And then if you resize any ellipse, it'll resize all ellipses. It's kind of trippy. Sorry. I'm going to undo that. There you go. So I'm going to deselect everything. With the single pointer, you can click anywhere on the canvas and then just drag your mouse over things, so you don't have to single click them. Yeah. If I'm just holding down the left button as I scroll over these, and it selects them. And now I can resize all of those. So let me resize those to just the right size. There we go. And let me move them all. Anything that's selected will now move. Let me undo symmetries and move them. There we go. That's a little better. And deselect everything. Let me show you another really cool tool. This drag properties box. It's the one over the plus sign. Drag properties. Anything that is selected, I can drag the properties to those things. Check this out. So if I select all these latent variables here, select that one, except the top one, I can specify that I can drag the x-coordinate from one object to anything that's selected, and it will inherit that property from the thing it was dragged from. So I drag the x-coordinate from this one to all these selected ones, and it pushed them all the right way. If I wanted to, I could also do something cool like this. Let's say I have these three items here, this item, and latent, and they're not perfectly distributed, and I'm, kind of obsessive about that. So if I were to select those 3 items, 1, 2, 3, I could go to Edit, Space Vertically, and it will perfectly center or space those.
Do that again?
Yeah, I'll do it with this one up here. Let me deselect. I'm going to go select this and this and this, these three objects, and go to Edit, Space Vertically, and that will perfectly center this vertically in between these two. I could do that with all of these here and space them all perfectly vertically as well. Let me go ahead and deselect. I'm going to select all these errors and inherit the x-coordinate from one of them. There we go. And x-coordinate, let's see, I like that one. Boom. Now they're all perfectly.
You just clicked the one you wanted.
And dragged it to the next one. Dragged it to one of the highlighted ones. Yeah. Cool. I'm also going to resize all of these because they're different sizes, or the markers at least a different size. There we go. Now they're all the same size. Cool. And also, if I select everything and use the magic wand, it will make everything pretty, perfectly symmetric. Sometimes you have to click a couple times. Last thing, I'm going to select all these and do my draw covariances. Plugins, draw covariances. There we go. Look at that beautiful model. And now select everything and move it to the middle. Ta-da! Yeah, with the x-coordinate, you can drag the property. In this case, it's the x-coordinate. You can actually drag any of these properties, the font size, the parameter constraint, even the name, height, width. But I'm going to do the y-coordinate for something. Let me uncheck x. I'm going to make sure all of these errors are perfectly centered on their items. So I'm dragging the y-coordinate from the item to the error, and it will perfectly center them vertically. I can do that this way as well. Boom. So it just drags the coordinate over. If you wanted to apply it to multiple things, then select those multiple things. In fact, let me just do it with these items here. So I'm going to select all these items. Looks like I missed one right here. and here. And I'll drag the x coordinate from one to another, and it pushes all the selected ones over. Now, and it looks like I need to resize those again. Resize observed. There we go. Cool. And now it's all pretty. Yep. That's not pretty. That's messed up. Let's see. X coordinate. I want the y coordinate and drag that from there to there. There we go. That's better. Much better. Much better. Great. So now you have a pretty model, hopefully. Any questions about formatting? Excellent. And now it's all recorded, so you go back and watch it if you want. You can also change all sorts of things in the view interface properties. You can change the colors that things are when they're highlighted, selected, or you can change the background of things to all sorts of different colors. You can change the default fonts. You can change, boy, all sorts of stuff, the size of the page, the canvas, everything. If I wanted to, make the indicator paths, the estimates on them, a bigger font, I could change that font to like 20 by double-clicking the line. If I run this, you'll see that, oh, that's missing. Well, you won't see it then.
How do you move the one on the top so it's more visible?
Yeah, and if you want to move an estimate, you go to this ice cream cone swivel thing, top, and just click on the parameter, and you can move it. Yeah. Yeah. There we go. Now you have no excuse for having an ugly model. There we go. All right. So yesterday we left off on we finished the CFA, we imputed factor scores, and then we did nothing with them. And so let's do something with them. Let's do a couple options. You want to go from a measurement model to a structural model, and there are two different ways to do this. You can either keep your latent model like this. Let me go to a model that actually has data. Go to our CFA again. Okay, so we want to go from a model that has data like this. We finished this model. We are trying to build this model right here, where information acquisition, decision quality are the DVs, usefulness, enjoyment are the mediators. So one way to do this is to keep all these latent factors. Actually, we had method bias, didn't we? So I could go from this model. Okay. Ooh. So when you have method bias, this first approach I'm going to show you is not ideal, but it's one way to do it. You could impute factor scores, which we did, and we'll use those in a sec, or you could start deleting covariances. So I'm going to delete these ones from decision quality and information acquisition, because these become the dependent variables, and also from useful and, was it enjoyment, I think? Go and enjoyment, because these become endogenous, and you can start moving those around. Let's see if it's going to work. Oh, it's not going to work because we have a CLF attached to it. Another reason it becomes painful. So you can go like this. Our independent variables are playful and atypical use. These things remain covaried and remain covaried with the marker as well. Then you draw from playful to the mediators, which are in useful and enjoyment, from atypical use to enjoyment and useful. Now, since these are endogenous, they need errors, so you draw errors on enjoyment and playful. Information acquisition and decision quality would become endogenous. Let's draw arrows from atypical or from enjoyment to information acquisition and to decision quality, and from useful to decision quality and information acquisition. It starts getting kind of messy. And if I go like this, I can make it a little less messy. Maybe. Let's see, that goes over there. It's getting worse by the second.
Yeah, that helps.
That's right. There we go. So here's our model, roughly speaking. And we need to do plugins, name unobserved variables, because we have a bunch of new error terms. Oh, we need errors. No, we got those errors. Let me move the errors to where they really belong. That error belongs there. And this error belongs here. And this error belongs here. And this error is in the wrong place. I put it on playful. That shouldn't have even worked. Should have been on useful. There we go. Plugins name unobserved. Okay, so we now have the model. This model looks like this, except we need those controls. For just instruction's sake, I'm not going to include the controls right now. But if we ran this, it should run. Should. Proceed. I'm going to sneeze. Nope. Okay. And we get these estimates. These are, let me zoom in. These are the estimates for our model. I got to move it all so we can see it. Here we go. Okay. Up arrow. Here we go. So we have a 33 positive 0.33 effect from enjoyment to information acquisition, very strong. Some other strong effects, looking good. From playfulness, not very good. From playful to enjoyment, very good. Atypical use to enjoyment, nothing at all. And from atypical use to useful, 0.11, not that strong. So this works is actually the more accurate way to do a structural equation model. Drawing one that looks like this, just boxes and arrows, is less accurate. Why? Because it doesn't estimate error variance properly at the measurement level. So this is the combination right here of a measurement and structural model. So estimating it here is far more accurate. Also, you have way more degrees of freedom in this model because we have so many parameters we could estimate that we are not. We don't have arrows between every one of these items. So you can see the degrees of freedom, if I look down here, 652 degrees of freedom. When we move to a model like this, we'll have 2 degrees of freedom when we move to this model instead of 652 degrees of freedom. So what does that do to our model fit? Well, the degrees of freedom is often the denominator in model fit equations, and so our model fit gets destroyed quite often. But also our chi-square deflates substantially. So right now our chi-square is 1265. Let's go build a path model. Let me save this as something so you have it for your record. Save as SEM initial latent. Let's build, and you can follow along now, let's build the path model with our imputed factor scores. So you should have the data from yesterday that we imputed in the data folder. It is called fs_c. We're using that one. Pull in the data as usual. Data, go find the data, fs_c. I'll wait for everybody else to get there. Who is following along with this data, just so I know? We have a few? Okay. Okay. Who's following along with their own data? No? A few? Okay. Oh, you haven't imputed yet? Okay. Okay. Oh, do you want to review that? We can review yesterday a little bit before. Yeah, that's fine. Would that help a few people? Okay. Okay, then before we move on, I'm just going to go back to the CFA with CMB. All right, so here's where we ended yesterday. We detected that we did have method bias because the chi-square difference test between the unconstrained and the zero-constrained models was significant, meaning that these models were different. So we had substantial shared variance, even after including the marker variable. So to impute these, first you got to make sure it runs with the unconstrained model. Not the one with the zeros on it, but the unconstrained CLF and marker variable model. Once that runs, go to Analyze, Data Imputation. Good morning. You haven't missed anything. We're just reviewing right now. Yeah. Okay, so analyze data imputation, and it's going to say, hey, you have a problem. Just proceed. It's going to think about it, and it's going to say, well, how do you want to do it? What do you want to name your file? If you don't choose a name, it'll choose a name for you. I'll show you how to just change that name. Go to File Names, and you can call it whatever you want. I'm going to call it Bootcamp Factor Scores. Save. And saving does nothing. You then have to click Impute. We're going to use the regression imputation. That does assume that you have fairly normally distributed data. If you don't, you might want to use the Bayesian imputation. But we'll just use regular regression imputation because we had fairly normal data. And you hit Impute. And did anyone get an error when they imputed? That's what I like to hear. Good. Okay. Okay. Good. It should say the following file was created. Hit OK. And after you hit OK, it's going to have this running forever. I'm still doing something. Either the circle or the hourglass. It's not actually doing anything. It's just a bug in Amos. So at that point, you close Amos. You can see it was created right here. Bootcamp Factor Scores was created for me. Yes, you do want to save. And then you can reopen Amos, and we'll be able to create a new causal model using those factor scores. So let's do that. File New. Go grab the data files. Factor scores. Now, so create a new project, go File New, and then go grab the data. The one we just made was factor scores. And then you should see, if you go to that white stacky thing, you should see these new variables here. Marker, enjoyment, useful, playful, decision quality, all these guys. Now use these in a causal model. So let's do that.
Okay.
Yes?
So we've got those. You're going to pull it out and
I am.
They're going to be canvas and they're going to be happy boxes.
Happy boxes.
So how are they different from sort of a factor that, I mean, I don't know how to answer the question.
How are they different from a latent factor?
Yeah.
I will tell you and show you. So these boxes represent, you remember in the EFA we extracted factor scores that account for the shared variance amongst all the items and all the cross-loadings and everything. They're just weighted scores that weight the central items to the construct more heavily. So if you had a loading, for example, in your pattern matrix that was 0.9, that would receive a higher weight than a loading of 0.5 on the same factor. So you have a weighted score. Same thing's happening here. Whichever item in our CFA had the highest loading receives the strongest weight. And so it becomes the centroid, sort of that factor when we produce this weighted score. The error terms extract the variance due to error, and so that is accounted for when creating the factor scores. But now that we're adding new relationships, for example, from here to here, the measurement error variance is not estimated during this. Whereas if we had a latent model, it would still be being measured, and it would alter slightly based on these new paths. Is this going to be terribly different from the causal model we just created with latent variables? No. Let's go ahead and check how different it is. Yeah. Yeah. So if you're pulling variables in and it shows the whole label, go to View, Analysis, or Interface Properties, the Miscellaneous tab, and don't display variable labels. Yeah. Okay. So let's see how different this is. Notice I haven't pulled in the marker variable or the common latent factor. even though those were also imputed. Because their effects are built into the factor scores that were extracted. So they're already being accounted for. The marker variable and the common latent factor, their effects are already being adjusted into these extracted scores.
So are we essentially building our path model then with these imputed variables?
Yep. Notice you have to covary the exogenous variables. In this case, we only have 2 exogenous variables. You have to give errors, this box thingy, box and circle. You have to give errors to any endogenous variables, anything being predicted. If you tap it a lot with the error boxy thingy, it just goes around at 45 degrees at a time. It's pretty fun. Cheap throws. Plugins name unobserved will name your errors. Plugins name unobserved. You can also resize observed, so they're all the same size. And we can do some quick formatting. That was stupid. Okay, there we go. Cool.
Go the other way.
Yeah.
That's used.
What are you talking about?
I was gonna fix the errors. The arrows
It's all good.
can't stand the sloppy errors. You gotta get them on
Like that.
Oh, so you can select everything on the like one.
It addresses everything simultaneously. Yeah. I could also, if I really wanted to be OCD about this, go like this and shape or space vertically. There we go. And then deselect this one and this one, and select this one and this one, and edit space vertically. There we go. Okay. And it looks all segmented. Go like this. There we go. Pretty clean. There's our model. Save as. SEM, yeah, initial path. Initial path. That's actually a path. I know path. Initial. Oh, I'm using the factor scores one. It's right here. Data. It's called Bootcamp Factor Scores.
which is your one you have
With the imputed values in it. Yep. And this is saved, so if you want to pull this up on your side, you're welcome to. Haven't addressed moderators, mediators, controls, anything like that. For now, since we didn't have controls added to our latent model, I'm not going to add them yet to here. I just want to show you the difference in estimates between that model and this model. So, you may recall from the other model, it was like a 33 here. It was like a 51 here, something like that. And remember, there's a really strong effect here from the other model. So they're roughly the same, just slightly different. Let me throw in the squared multiple correlations, and we'll get another better idea. Standardized. There we go. Okay. So we're predicting 18%, 43%, 31, 13. Let me go over to the other model, the initial latent. There we go. And run it. Proceed. Up arrow. Here. Oh, I didn't include the squared multiple correlations. Let me get those in there. That's the R square for those who are wondering. Squared multiple correlation is R square. So just doing this for comparison's sake. Okay, 25 and 8. Those are slightly different. This is 21 instead of 31. This is 2 instead of, what was it, 7? 33 instead of 31. 35 instead of whatever it was, 47. So the estimates are different. they're amplitude-wise, relative-wise, they're all about the same, distance apart and size, and direction, positive versus negative. But they will be different if you use a latent model versus a path model. Which one's more accurate? The latent model. So if you can, use that one. If you can't, use the path model. Will anyone fault you for using a path model? Only a couple people. Probably nobody you know. It'll be your luck though, your reviewer. You're like, why did you use a path model? Should have used a latent model.
So which one is more? No, I understood accuracy. Now, which one is more common?
Which one's more common to use? If you're using Amos, probably 50-50, path versus latent. I tend to use the path models when I have method bias or when I have interactions that I'll be doing. Because interactions get crazy messy if you have a latent model.
Is there any literature kind of
Justifying it? Yeah, actually something I published in IEEE. We say that doing interactions using a latent model in Amos is sometimes impossible. It won't even estimate because there are too many parameters to estimate. So that's sort of justification. It's published. All right, so I'm going to go, for teaching purposes, it's also easier to use a path model because it's less messy, less complexity to deal with. Oh, I don't know. Let me see. It will be soon if it isn't already. No, there's one of them, but no, let me pull in the other one. Let's see. Here it is, IEEE. Okay, so this one's about when to use PLS and its differences between Amos and PLS. And it talks about interactions and how it really is a lot easier to do latent interactions in PLS than it is in Amos due to parameter estimations and power issues. Okay. So that's that. Any questions about that before I start talking about some concepts?
Do you have a little write-up or path model? I just feel like I submitted a path model one time in review of grades.
Really? You got one of those? You got lucky, huh? No, I don't know of any research actually that explicitly discusses using factor scores instead of latent variables. But if you wanted to find one, that would be what I would search for is factor scores. Yeah, because that would give you the justification.
James, what was the name of those two files again?
The two that I just created in Amos, or the data set? The data set or the model? The model, sure. Yeah, there's SEM initial and path initial.
This is clarification. The latent model is not using the factor scores, right?
Yep, didn't use them in the latent model. Didn't need to. It didn't use the factor scores in the latent model. There was no need to because I have the actual measures. So notice I don't have any of those squares or those boxes in here. But notice also I did retain the CLF and the marker. Whereas in the path model, I don't have the CLF or the marker because they're already accounted for in the imputed scores. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to go over some things that might be a little bit review for a few of you, but new to some of you. Difference between mediation and moderation. Today we're going to do mediation and moderation and control variables, and whatever we have time left for, I have a few other things we can do if we'd like. So mediation versus moderation, and this gets confused all the time. In the emails I get often, they say the word moderator, they mean the word mediator. Happens all the time. So, quick difference. Mediation is the reason for the effect the X variable has on the Y variable. So discovery, for example, is the reason, or at least partly the reason, why curiosity impacts system satisfaction. Whereas moderation simply changes the nature of that effect. Curiosity affects system satisfaction differently because of discovery. Discovery will amplify that effect. So it's not the reason for the effect, it is just an amplifier of the effect in moderation. So mediation logic, X affects M, which affects Y. The reason X affects M, or X affects Y, is because of M. It's the reason for the effect. Huh? At least partially. It might not be the full reason, but it's at least partly the reason why X affects Y. Yeah. So in the case of this, interest affects learning. Why? Well, it's because interest leads to engagement, and engagement affects learning. At least that's part of the reason. How do you determine the significance of mediation? This has changed since I taught you guys last year. So pay attention. There have been in the past many approaches for testing mediation. The Barron and Kenny approach, which I won't even talk about, the Sobel test, which has known flaws, and various other unapproved methods that I may or may not have made videos about. I have decided to go mainstream and invented a new approach, but got it approved through the powers that be that it is a sound and reliable approach, and actually better than these other approaches. So we're going to do that. It's through bootstrapping and checking the indirect effect for significance. And I'll show you how to do that. You won't have to tamper with your model. In the past, I've shown in some videos you remove paths or remove variables. Don't have to do that anymore. There's a new way. So let's do it. Grab this model or your own model if you want. And we're going to do a mediation exercise. We're also going to throw the controls in there for now, just so that they're always present. We're going to test to see if usefulness mediates the relationship between atypical use and decision quality. Atypical use, usefulness, decision quality. I'm going to move these around so that they're in the same order. They match the model we have here. Atypical use is on the bottom. So playful is going to go up here. Atypical is going to go down there. Enjoyment is going to go on the bottom. Oop, oop, no, this one. And useful is going to go on the top. I'm going to save that right now. Make sure I have this in the right order. And I had it all upside down. How about that? Information acquisition will go on the top. Decision quality will go on the bottom. Now it matches our PowerPoint, so we won't get confused. Let me go back here, save this. All right, so I'm using path initial that is saved in the Dropbox folder now. Oh, and then I need to add controls, but I'll let you guys do that with me. Yeah. Oh, thank you. I am missing 2 arrows. From useful to decision quality and enjoyment to information acquisition, which might also explain the extent of the differences between our path and our latent model. Yeah. In fact, if I run that, it does change things quite a bit. Okay. So this is saved in the Dropbox folder now. Online Shu asked, why do we have to covary playful and atypical use? The answer is because we're using a covariance-based SEM tool, and covariance-based SEM is built upon the covariance matrix, which assumes that all exogenous variables are covaried. So any variable that's not being predicted is being covaried. It's just an assumption of covariance-based statistics. Okay. So we now have a model that matches our PowerPoint, except we haven't included age and frequency. So let's do that real quick. Let's throw in age and frequency. To do that, you just pull in age and pull in frequency from the white stacky thing. Move them around so that they're pretty. Now, what do we do with them? Because they're exogenous, you have to covary them with these guys. and with each other. Did I miss something? Oh, good. So because they're exogenous, you're expected to covary them. Yes? Yeah, for the latent model, you do the same thing. You just pull in these boxes into the latent model and then covary them to the latent factors that are exogenous. Yep. And then there are different schools of thought on what to do with the regressions. You can either regress them on everything, which means you're controlling for the effects of age and frequency on everything in the model, or you can just regress them on things you think they might have an effect on, theoretically. So, do I think age will affect information acquisition? It's possible. Do I think age will affect decision quality? Definitely. Hopefully you make better decisions as you get older, right? Do I think age will affect enjoyment? Maybe. I don't know if there's a strong theoretical logic for that. Age unuseful? Maybe. Frequency to enjoyment? I bet there's something there. Frequency useful? I bet there's something there. In fact, frequency to all of these makes sense to me. The more you use it, sort of the better the outcomes, right? And the more you enjoy it.
So you're kind of the school where you just take.
You pick the ones that theoretically make sense. Yeah, because in a path model, you are scraping for every degree of freedom you can get. If I run this model, let's see how many degrees of freedom we have. We have all of 7 degrees of freedom. Every time I include one more path, I lose a degree of freedom. So really, I don't want to include paths that aren't adding meaning to my model. And that's even justification for deleting non-significant paths that aren't theorized. So paths that aren't theorized are paths from controls, typically. So if any of these weren't significant, I might go ahead and delete them. Like this 0.02, it's having no effect. But it's also the only thing I'm using age on.
But how do you justify that?
How to justify it? It's having no impact on the model. Well, it is actually. It's having a very minor impact on the model. I would say I'm using a path model where the degrees of freedom are at a premium. And so we're trying to free up as many degrees of freedom as possible. But in this case, getting rid of age actually will decrease my degrees of freedom because it's only regressing on one thing, whereas it could be regressing on multiple things. So that won't help us.
Also, can you explain again why that age is not enjoyable?
Yeah, I don't think age is going to have an effect on enjoyment or on usefulness. I just didn't include it. Now we can find out if it really does. If I go to my output and do modification indices, it'll tell us if there's an effect. So we run that. Go look at the output. Go look at modification indices. It's thinking about it. Modification indices. And it says, if I look at the regressions area, age has no effect on those. Yeah. Cool.
How do you explain that? No. How do you report that?
How do you report your inclusion of the controls? Or so typically,
Well, the conclusion, why the control doesn't have
why you think it won't, or why you haven't added one?
why it's added, but it's not significant.
Oh, you don't really have to talk about it in your paper. Yeah, you included the control, unless it's a control that is a variable from past literature that is known to have an effect on your dependent variable. If it's not that the case, you don't really need to talk about it that much, just report its effects. If it is a variable that has known effects from the literature, for example, if we were trying to predict firm performance, and we include the control variable of a number of employees, or firm size. Firm size is a known predictor, strong predictor of firm performance. If we included it as a control in our model and it had no effect, I would definitely talk about that. That's very interesting. It contradicts known assumptions. But if I'm using something like age, where it's not like it's from the literature, it's just something I thought I'd throw in there to make sure it has no effect. It's not an interesting story. If it doesn't have an effect, I wouldn't talk about it. I'd report its effects in a table, but I wouldn't actually talk about it that much. Yeah. Okay. Okie dokie. So, mediation is where we were. How are we going to test mediation? First off, you need a new tool that I created. Let's see. Go to the stat wiki. Oh, it might not work for you. We'll see. It's an estimand. It's not a plugin. So it might work for you. And if it doesn't work for you, I know a way to make it work. Well, offline, we can work on it. So I've created a few new estimands. So you want the A times B estimand. And don't left-click it. You're going to right-click it, save as. Same as before. You're going to save it, go to it, unblock it, just like with the plugins. Right-click it, unblock it, and then go stick it in some folder in Amos. It doesn't have to be in the plugins folder. In fact, it probably shouldn't be in the plugins folder. For me, I stuck it in the 23 folder. Oops, not there. You can stick it on your desktop if you want. Totally fine. Yep, just don't delete it later. IBM, SPSS, Amos. So I stuck it in the 23 folder as my indirect effects estimand.
If we downloaded it in, say, April 29th.
This one hasn't changed. Yeah. Yeah. So stick it into a relevant folder. Desktop's fine, or downloads folder is fine. I stuck it in 23, and in my video where I show this, I stuck it in 23. So if you wanted to try to follow the video, that might be a place to put it. Once that's in there and it's unblocked, go into Amos and see at the bottom where it says not estimating any user-defined estimand. You ever think that's like an error or something? It's not. You can, as a savvy user, write code for Amos, and it will produce new output tables in the output view text area. So I wrote some code that'll do that for you. So I'm going to go to recent places, plugin 23. Cool. So go find the estimand. It's the my indirect effects estimand, and open that one. Again, that's by clicking down here on the bottom and saying select estimands. Give you a sec. Make sure it's unblocked again. Yes, anytime you test a hypothesis with a new model, you must meet model fit thresholds. Yeah. Yep. Anytime there's a new model, we got to see that model fit. Otherwise, we don't know if we can rely on the findings you just made. So we'll do that definitely as we test this. Yep. There might be some covariating we need to do. Yep.
So once we go back in where we saved it.
Yeah. Once you select it, it should say estimating my indirect effects. Okay. Once that's go ahead.
Sorry. So it's having me look for a file.
Yeah. Go find that file you downloaded.
And open it.
And yeah, just hit open. And when you do that, we are going to tell it which indirect effect we want it to estimate. Now, bootstrapping, you can test indirect effects. But the problem with testing indirect effects using the built-in Amos bootstrapping is that there are multiple indirect paths between the IVs and the DVs. I can go from playful to enjoyment to information acquisition, or I can go from playful to useful to information acquisition. But when Amos runs the bootstrapping indirect effects, it puts them all together. And so you just get the net indirect effects. You can't theorize about a single path indirect effect without deleting paths. So we're going to tell it which path. You're going to double click on this path. Oh wait, which one are we theorizing about in our exercise? Useful to atypical to decision. So useful, atypical, useful decision, sorry. So this path, atypical to useful, we're going to name its parameter capital A. And then we're going to name the parameter from useful to decision quality capital B. And what this is telling the system is, I want you to create an indirect estimate for this particular path. We also need to, in our analysis properties, do a bootstrap. Bootstrap tab about 2,000 times. Bias corrected intervals. You can do 90 or 95, depends on what you set your alpha to. We'll do 95. Why not? 95% confidence intervals. So perform the bootstrap and all that. And yeah, sure. In the output tab, in the bootstrap tab, yeah, perform the bootstrap at 2,000 samples and do bias corrected confidence intervals at 95. Bootstrapping introduces an inflationary bias, and so this will extract out that bias. On the output, I have standardized estimates, squared multiple correlations. Indirect effects? We can, if we want. I'm calculating it manually using this estimand.
Right, but I thought in English you could track the multiple deviation through the
Yeah, through the indirect effects.
yeah, through the English you could actually separate.
I don't know if so. It doesn't calculate it for you separately. You have to go through and manually calculate it. So I've done that for you programmatically. Yeah, simplify things. I hate having to manually gather things every time I do something. So if you run this and hit the and go look at the output. Ouch. Go to estimates, scalars, and you'll see at the bottom there's a new one called user-defined estimands. Zoom in a little bit here. So the estimate scalars, user-defined estimands, and the new indirect effect is 0.012. If you go down here to the bias-corrected path, it gives you that estimate, gives you the lower and upper bounds, and gives you the p-value for that indirect effect. So this tells you whether the mediation is significant on that path.
That's very helpful.
Yeah.
Indirect effects through the mediator.
Just through that particular mediator, that path, not through everything else. Yeah. Also, it gives you the standard errors if you need those, the mean and standard error, and how much bias was involved, and the standard error of that bias. So, pretty fun. It's below estimates. Yeah, there you go. So anyway, the one you'll want to look at really is this bias corrected percentile method with the estimate and the p-value. So what I would say is there is no significant indirect effect between playful and atypical use and decision quality through usefulness. Or it's essentially H1 over here, H1A not supported. And I would report the estimate, the 0.012, and the p-value. 0.45. That's awful. Yeah. I talked to Jagdeep about it, and he said, "This is amazing. Good job." Yeah. So, what it does is it resolves all the issues we've been having in literature about using Sobel testing and Barron and Kenny and the weaknesses of all those approaches. And it also resolves the complexity of the process plugin for SPSS, because it's essentially doing everything process, Preacher and Hayes' process macro does, but using one line of code. How do you reference it?
Could you write a paper real quick?
And get it published? For now, you can cite the video. That's as close as you can get, or the stat wiki. You could use because it's an intro to statistics kind of thing. I have the standard errors, I have the confidence intervals. Here's the p-value for that estimate. It's not like it's some unorthodox approach. Yeah, so it's perfectly legitimate. Yeah. So there you go. Now, what you can do now is go back to the model. Let's test that second hypothesis. The second was useful mediates play to information acquisition. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to double-click the A and delete it, put it up here, capital A, and click the B, delete it, and put it up here. Or was it through enjoyment or through useful? Through useful. Okay. Okay, so I'll put it up here, capital B. So you just move it around depending on which indirect effect you want to estimate. Run it again, and look at the output. Estimates, scalars, user-defined. Here it is. Oh, we have a significant indirect effect. So usefulness does mediate the positive relationship between playfulness and information acquisition. H1B is supported. Now, with this estimate and this p-value.
The estimate reflects the amount of.
It's the slope for that equation.
Right.
Nothing else is, well, everything else is being accounted for, all the other variants. That's the beauty of it. You're not tampering with the model at all. All of the variance is being accounted for while estimating this indirect effect on its own. Yeah. So hooray! And there's a video for this. Yeah, it's in the SEM series 2016. I added it after I created the playlist. Okay. So that's mediation. It's been greatly simplified. Hooray! Now,
Where is I can see what is that? Yeah, can you make it?
I'm thinking you need glasses.
Yeah,
I mean, that is really big. But yeah, so that's, unless you're looking on the left side. Sorry, are you looking on over here? Okay, so yeah, estimates, scalars, user-defined estimands. And then go down to bias-corrected percentile. Unless you want the bootstrap errors, then that's up here.
Yeah, the bottom one.
The bottom one.
You don't have to look up the two-scale test.
It's right there. Yep.
How many interactions of the bootstrap do you think it's fair?
Sorry again?
For the bootstrap,
What about it?
how many do you run?
How many? So I did 2,000. There's a paper out, I think it's by Hayes right now, that says there's no reason to run less than 5,000 because we can. Our computers are so powerful now, why not just run 5,000? So what a bootstrap does is short story, one part of it is it reduces error. And the more resamples you use, the more the reduction in error, the greater the critical ratio, the lower the p-value. So the more you use, the more effective this will be.
Is it possible to, at some point, given the number, including, I don't know, 200 or 1,000 or 10,000 iterations, that at some, is there a complexity or a complexity point that you say?
Is there an optimal number?
This could change the value or this could change dramatically?
So I've played with that before, and typically it's this diminishing returns line, where you're from 100 to 1,000 is this huge improvement, and from 1,000 to 2,000, smaller. 2,000 to 5,000, very small. 5,000 plus, very, very small return. Yeah. Yeah, hardly change anything. But if you run it with 100, you'll see very different. You'll have a lot more error. Yeah. Okay. Won't give you the plugin? I'll be honest. I don't use Internet Explorer. Yeah, save link as. Do you actually need to use a control variable? Maybe just not use it in the model? So Fabiano has a great question. Do we have to have controls in every model we test? The answer is no. No. But if there is a potential confound that you're not accounting for, reviewers will say, well, yeah, that's all fine and dandy, but what about this? That's the real reason for the change in your dependent variable. It's not anything you theorize, it's this that you didn't theorize. You know, read Brown et al., 2003. You missed it. Sorry. And you're sunk. unless you collect the data on that. So yeah, you need to include controls when there are potential confounds. But when there are not potential confounds, you're fine. And in fact, including controls just for the sake of including controls is probably a bad idea. Like in throwing age, gender, education, and experience in everything, it's not a great idea, unless those are truly confounding variables. Okay. Cool. So that's how you sort of iterate through and test each of those paths. I can.
Good number of controls that you could.
Oh, you could control for everything in the world, right?
Yeah, there's a debate in among some
People.
instructors.
Yes.
Have the controls don't need them. Others have to have them. And then there's sort of this sweet spot of.
Yeah. So controls, again, it all boils down to your theory. They do inflate your R square. So if you have more controls than actual antecedents, like independent variables, that's kind of weird, because that means you're potentially going to have more variance explained by your controls than by your predictors, which would be weird. Yeah. Now, it depends on your field as well. In finance and in medicine, chemistry, sometimes the controls do explain more of the variance than your independent variables, and you're just trying to find some other variable that will increase your R square beyond the controls. But in behavioral sciences, psychology, things like that, you want your independent variables to be the prime predictors.
It seems like when we do the path model, you kind of just, I think it's going to be this way. Is there any way to check this is the best model?
Oh yeah, with the controls, you mean?
Yeah, and with like the controls, how you're thinking about it.
Yeah, so with the controls, I can show you a sort of a cheating way. Let me delete all these paths from the control. Purely atheoretical, but it will tell you where all the effects are. So if I run a path model with the controls just covaried, but no regressions, and make sure I have modification indices checked, and a low threshold for it. I have it at 4 right now because my chi-square is small. If I run this, it's going to tell me exactly where my controls have effects. So I'll go to the output, go to modification indices, check out the regressions. Here we go. Frequency affects enjoyment. It affects usefulness. It affects, that's it. Age has no effects, really. So I could drop age if I wanted. But I definitely need to control for the effects of frequency on enjoyment and frequency on useful.
Would you ever do that when you're trimming your model later on if you see
If I needed degrees of freedom desperately, yeah. Yeah. So frequency was on useful and enjoyment, was it? Yeah. There we go. I had no effects on those others. Interesting. Cool. And age has no effect at all. So I'm just going to get rid of it. Okay. Now, if your theory says I'm controlling for age, you better control for age and just keep it in there and say it had no effect. But again, if you're scraping for degrees of freedom, you might have justification for removing it or removing the paths that are non-significant. One thing we didn't do while testing for this mediated effect was check model fit. We cannot say with confidence, despite seeing a significant indirect effect here, we cannot say with confidence that usefulness mediates the effect between playfulness and information acquisition, unless we first check model fit. So we better check model fit. This is so big. Sorry, Rodolfo, I'm going to shrink this. Okay. I can run the mediation before or after is fine. I just need to, before I report the results of the mediation, I need to check model fit. That makes sense. Yeah, check model fit first. Wow, that's some awful model fit. Look at that, CFI of 0.766. No redeeming that. Look at this RMSEA of 314. Just awful. So let's just check modification and see to say why. Oh, look at that. E3 and E4. Boom. That's the biggest one. Let's go to the regressions here. So it looks like decision quality and information acquisition are strongly correlated. That makes sense. Remember our EFA? Those two factors, strongly correlated. And yet in this model, we are not accounting for that shared variance between them. So if I say that usefulness predicts information acquisition, it might not actually. It might be explaining the variance that's already explained by decision quality. So I have two options here. I can either covary the error terms between 3 and 4, or I can draw a regression line between decision quality and information acquisition, which is probably more real. Who cares about reality, right? Yeah. This is my theory we're breaking. What should I do? According to according to Dave Kenny, you can covary the errors of two dependent variables if they're expected to be related. And what does this do? It still extracts their shared variance so that whatever variance is left can be explained by these predictors. So that is a legitimate approach in a path model. It will change the effect. Let me show you the effects real quick. From useful to information acquisition, 42 and then 49 on decision quality. If I covary these, those are going to drop quite a bit. At least they should. Watch me eat my words. Huh, they didn't drop very much. Nice, 41 and 49. But look at the strong relationship. The R-squares also didn't drop tremendously. So we are accounting for their shared variance while not having to explicitly theorize about them and test those hypotheses, which is kind of nice. Kenny also says, though, if you're going to covary the dependent variables, you might want to covary the mediators. And in this case, useful and enjoyment, theoretically, I would say, yeah, these are related. So I'm going to covary those. Again, Dave Kenny gives the justification for this. So I put all blame on him. Really nice guy, by the way. I emailed him once to ask him something about, I didn't understand interactions, and so I emailed him. And this is before I used to get 24 emails a day myself. And he spent pages trying to teach me, and he got back to me just immediately. Really nice guy. Anyway.
Could you please send us that?
Huh?
The Kenny?
So the Kenny website. The Kenny website is from the StatWiki. If you go to the CFA and just search Control F Kenny, and you'll see it. Dave Kenny's website. It's davidakenny.net. CM respec. Not at Case.
No, Hayes.
Hayes. Oh, the Preacher and Hayes article? There are many. Kathy would have assigned it to you if you want it. It would have been in your syllabus. Not this one. Why wouldn't we draw a regression? So we could do that. It's definitely not part of our theory. We'd have to be changing our theory at this point, which is fine. It's just, how would you report that? You'd have to say, well, this was our theory. When we ran the model, we observed we didn't have model fit. Turns out there's a strong relationship between these two variables. So when testing all of our hypotheses, we included that relationship so that the model fit and we could rely on our relationships. You wouldn't be testing a hypothesis. Let's say we did draw a line there. We wouldn't be testing a hypothesis with that line. We'd just be accounting for the shared variance. See, decision quality improves information. Information, I think, improves decision quality. So you could do it like that. And let's see how it changed the estimates. I think we'll change it more. Notice that one dropped a bit. R square increases substantially. So that's another approach. Which approach is better? Whatever you can argue.
I always struggle with because some people they don't go over it.
Yeah.
Especially the DVs, right?
Yeah. Okay. So if you want to play safe, yeah, definitely the more legitimate approach, drawing the regression line. You just have to explain it in that way. In a paper, you'd say we need to account for the shared variance between the two dependent variables while not explicitly theorizing about them. We weren't interested in that relationship, but we need to account for their variance so that any relationships we did observe would be adjusted for that shared variance between the two variables. So let me run this. Let's take approach B, the more legitimate approach. Let's go look at the modification indices one more time. And it looks like there's still a very strong relationship between the mediators. So let me throw that in there.
That's the one that confused me is that
Okay.
we're okay with no covariates those there. Like the dependent variables make perfect sense to me.
But the mediators maybe not.
Mediators are a little bit more question.
It's the same idea. As we need to account for the shared variance between them without explicitly theorizing about them. What drives what? Useful drives enjoyment. Enjoyment drives useful. See, I don't see a true causal relationship here, and that's why I'd covary the errors instead. We're accounting for the shared variance, but not saying there's a causal relationship. Whereas with the dependent variables, I can see a causal relationship between information acquisition and decision quality. These ones, I can't see. I mean, I can see that they move together. They're probably associated, but I don't see that they're causally related. So in this case, I would just covary their errors.
Would you say satisfaction is cause and delight, or would you say there's probably some commonality for the better or the errors?
But that is hard to. So satisfaction and delight, which causes the other?
Well, it's either satisfaction, cause and delight, or the errors. We can't be, I don't see delight cause and delight.
Yeah, which happens first, temporally speaking?
Satisfaction should.
Okay.
But maybe not, I don't know.
Yeah. Are you delighted because you're satisfied?
Well, the conclusion thing, the things that cause delight are different than things that cause satisfaction.
And which happens first? It's the question. The things that cause delight or the things that... Okay, so then I would covary their errors. Because they're just associated, but not causally, temporally, causally related, right? Whatever you can argue, that's science. Okay, I ran this again. Let's see if it changes things dramatically. Nope, we're still pretty strong. Let's see if the model fit is tolerable. We only have 4 degrees of freedom. We're really getting low here. Model fit. CFI of 980. Woohoo! RMSEA. Nah. Let's see. Where'd it go? RMSEA. Oh my goodness, it's wigging out on me. There we go. Okay. 113. Not good. Okay. Why? Because I have 4 degrees of freedom. RMSEA is a parsimony adjusted measure. And so degrees of freedom is on the denominator. So that's unfortunate. Let's do the SRMR. Plugins, SRMR. Run it. 0.02. I mean, that is so low. So at this point, I say, look, I have the CFI, I have the SRMR, we're good to go. I may want to look and just see in the modification indices if there's something I'm totally missing. This, playful causes decision quality. That's the thing I'm missing. I don't have a direct effect from play to decision quality. Would you say those are causally related? The more I play with it, the better decisions I make with it? Maybe not for you. So yeah, I think for some people maybe, but for some people no. Yeah. Huh? Yeah. Okay. So you never know. Okay. For now, I'm going to say, you know what, we're close enough. We're close enough. We have decent model fit, especially for a model that has only 4 degrees of freedom. This is a pretty good model fit. Again, the more degrees of freedom you have, the easier it is to obtain good model fit.
The Siemens number was pretty high, right?
The Siemens was great, 0.98, I think, right? Oh, sorry, the CFI was. C-min was only 23. So,
Sorry, Siemens divided by the
yeah, it is a 5. Yeah. So not fabulous, but not terrible. Definitely not terrible. Especially when you only have 4 degrees of freedom. Yeah. You have to run it again after that window's open. Don't close that window. Run it while the window's open. Now, if I wanted to be kind of try to optimize things a little bit, get back some degrees of freedom, I could go look at these paths and see which ones weren't significant and drop those paths. Now, if I'm going to do this, it's important that I report their terminal estimate, the estimate right before you deleted the path, because you're probably theorizing about that path. So if you're going to delete it, report it. Again, this is only if you're scraping for degrees of freedom.
Would that typically be reported in like a correlation table?
It'd be reported just as your.
Direct effect table.
It would be reported wherever you're reporting your hypotheses results. Yeah. So in the findings section, if you.
But it's before you go on to explain that you trimmed it out.
Here's what I would do. Let's say we were going to drop this one right here, p-value of 513, atypical use to usefulness. Let's say I had theorized that atypical use affects usefulness. I would report the terminal effect. What is it? Negative, right here, atypical use to usefulness, 0.034 with a p-value of 544 or whatever it was, 513, for my hypothesis results. I'd report that. And then say, maybe in a little footnote, deleted this path in order to free up a degree of freedom. Yeah. Wouldn't support it anyway. Yeah. You report it, trim it, and you make sure you say why you trimmed it. It was because we had 4 degrees of freedom and we're trying to free up the model a bit.
But at that point, if we're introduced, they want you to full length model.
You could do a latent model instead. In fact, if you want to do a latent model for everything except interactions, you're welcome to.
So with the high RMCA, it doesn't mean that model was the same. It means that
It's not a parsimonious model.
exactly it's not parsimonious.
Yeah, with a high RMSEA, it means you don't have a parsimonious model.
The analysis works. The analysis is supported by model. So
Yeah, so our CFI says we have good fit. Yeah, so we're probably good enough. Do I need to take drastic measures? Probably not. If I wanted to, I could be slightly justified if I argued it carefully. I'm not going to delete those paths.
it's not about making a decision. So that we have to remodel because the RMCA is high.
Correct, if we're okay with a non-parsimonious model. That's fine, yeah. Some would just say that a non-parsimonious model is also an atheoretical model, because everything's predicting everything. Okay, so what am I going to do at this point? Nothing. I'm not going to change the model. If I did, let me just show you, the RMACA should improve if I deleted this path. I'll put it right back. But remember it was what, 113? If I go back, model fit, go down to RMACA, and now it's 0.099. Yeah, so because I'm freeing up a degree of freedom, which is on the denominator, it's going to improve. If I got rid of one more non-significant path, I'd probably be in the right zone. My CFI didn't change.
For example, the non-parsimonious model this year is
This is not a parsimonious model. Yeah. Okay. So after assessing the model fit is good, then you can say, yeah, we found. Actually, we didn't check if we had still an indirect effect. Go to the estimates, go to scalars, user defined, and see if we still have a significant effect. The answer is yes, we still have a significant effect. Indirect. So that hypothesis is supported because we had model fit and we had a significant p-value there.
If the hypothesis is not supported because it is not being mediated by anything, we just present, well,
Not supported.
not supported, but there is a relationship. There is a causal relationship. Right.
There is a causal relationship between A and B, and you mean
A and C, for example.
there's a causal relationship between like playful and information acquisition? Possibly. We have to go check it. Yeah. In fact, that brings up another good point. What was it? Playful and information acquisition right here is a significant effect. Yep. And there's the estimate, unstandardized. See. So now let's talk about partial versus full. Some people say you shouldn't even call it partial or full or whatever. If you wanted to report partial or full mediation, it is full mediation if the direct effect this one right here between IV and DV is not significant, but the indirect effect is significant. It is partial if the direct effect is significant and the indirect effect is significant. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, or you can trim that path and then it's fully mediated, but only if you have good model fit. Now there's also a competitive mediation. That's when both paths are significant, the indirect and the direct, but they're in opposite directions. One is negative, one is positive.
And is that a reason for rejecting an hypothesis?
No.
Just for correcting?
So competitive mediation is fascinating, I think. It says that the independent variable has a dual effect on the dependent variable, which can only be separated through a mediator. So once the mediator mediates or transfers the positive effect, the direct negative effect is free to be there. Yeah.
So for the, for example, useful, playful, cynical, mediation, well, which one? Enjoyment had the, which one had mediation?
Useful is mediating the effect from playful to information acquisition.
So for starters, would playful, would there has to be a relationship between playful and information act for mediation
to even occur. So depending on who you ask. Yeah, some people say you don't even have to have an effect, or an original effect. Preacher, and I think it's Preacher, says that. So he says as long as you have an indirect effect, you have mediation, regardless. So you wouldn't even test the model without usefulness in place. It would always be there. Okay. Should we take a quick break, or should we plow on? Quick break? Okay. Let's take a 5, 6, 7 minute break. That sort of wraps up mediation.
Yeah, I haven't filled them down yet.
Is maxing out iteration. Yeah, but 6,000. Boom. Get it down. So it's good to go, right? If we look here and look at the standard errors, are there any that are like in fact, if we oh, holy shnikes. There's your problem. There's something going on with these intervals. So what I would do, the first thing I do is try to fiddle around with the parameter constraint, do a communicator analysis, see if that comes. If not, I would say, you know what? Ease of use is sort of an underlying mechanism throughout all these variables, and that's why it's being destroyed by the common layer. In order, instead of destroying our model, we're opting to accept a shared variance at the same time. Just get rid of the zero. And then it sees the plugin will see, okay, you laid this, the second round,
Yeah, in fact, one of the students emailed us, I can't remember, and said, hey, look, here's the problem I'm facing. I have justification for getting CLF. Yeah. Okay, he said, yeah. But I don't think he played around with moving parameters. So you gotta try that.
I have a question.
Yeah, that's causing the issue. It's not able to minimize because of the error.
So I did a. I just took it. You get out and check like.
That's what I know. Actually, it says
That's bigger difference. Yeah.
okay, and go to the output.
I want to be married.
Well, you want, that's wrong, what you says it's fine, that's not. So I don't know why the up arrow is not working, but it's there.
Yeah, there's a bunch of
That's unfortunate.
You would have.
I don't know why. You don't need the up arrow.
close it and come back.
What are you
Sorry.
saying? You don't need the up arrow though, it's all in there, yeah, but.
I still like you said, because I got the,
Right.
So
Because the reason why it matters is the way the test is being put out. It'll
Yeah.
say.
Not true.
Okay.
But it's just why it's producing all the output.
Yeah, it seems to be produced the output at all. Like the invariant.
Yeah, cool.
And
It works, it just doesn't go up.
Double click. I want to see. There are specifications of constraints here.
It's just like an operator error.
No, I think it's an Amos problem. I think you're doing fine.
James thinks it's fine.
That's the manager job, so we're going to be 3. Yeah.
And
Animation. You already have that.
I don't think that.
But
we're gonna have to see.
Is not available right now.
I look like they were close to that. It's not anything off me, but I don't know, they were.
So we can like.
Yeah, I know. I don't know, I did that like in the eighties.
well, you because when you say not there, but no comment, when it's different, you just.
So it's not.
You have a Z drive.
And then you said to do, I'm not just saying, yeah, just give you a measure.
Nothing written out. Okay, so now.
You're on backside now.
That's what we're at.
So what we have to do is go over to the side, do it as a Chrome on Windows.
Tell me do that.
That's gonna be.
Easier later on. So you go to Internet Explorer. Go back.
It's,
And
generate for this.
then you just go unload Chrome. Search for that anywhere.
That's it?
Yeah.
No, you can start trying to get you. I love it here. Cool. I've got coming in variant. And that's the invariant. I like regression. And here, and you do multi-group invariant constraint.
Cool.
Okay, now I need to know that.
Okay, right now, this is my new data file with the imputed value. And then, next. And let them.
So now you can create
Yeah, it's probably easier to do it. It's that's what most of us. Yeah, just do a multi-group, and then delete the one. Okay, so once done, I can do that multi-group. This is a multi-group statement is a very.
And it says you're blinking, but you're not, just close Amos and then.
And then run.
I remember what we did.
Multi-group. And statement is a very.
Bring in the data file, the new data file. Underscore C.
And you were right.
Yeah. Click on the white side. And it'll be at the bottom. Your variables. Yes. That's just the road number. You don't remember. Yeah, the bond.
So,
Young boy.
stretches. I'm tired.
Yeah, I'm getting worn out 3 days in a row.
We just came back from
2 weekends in a row. That's rough.
I was wondering, where did you select right here in regards to actually using the plugin, or not the plugin,
Yes.
yeah.
What do I do?
You somewhere you select at the bottom.
You just click on it. Click on that, and then choose the button that says option that says select estimand. So I'll show you here. So you click on it and say select estimands,
Okay.
and then you go find that estimand wherever you saved it.
Perfect.
Yeah. And then it assumes that you'll have an A and a B that it can bring in and make these calculations with.
I just didn't see the bottom.
My head was in the way.
Is that what?
Big head.
So, I don't.
I had no research and show them as one. Just delete one more. And label it. Go to the bottom. Well, did you see the output? Is it still fine? So, go look. Yeah, well, let's go look at estimates real quick. So these are all still pretty low, and then that one. Is that you best well, but yeah, you might delete these drawings. Yeah. No, we haven't done that. Oh, thank you so much for bringing that up. I need to do that. Yeah, I forgot about that. Okay. No, I should have done that before we did this. Oops. Okay, we'll do that. It's in the wrong order. This should go way up here. Yes.
We did this part right after we did the pattern matrix, right? The correlation.
Sorry, let's take that in there before. There we go. Okay. We haven't done the correlation matrix yet.
Oh, we haven't done that one yet?
Nope.
Oh, I thought we did.
Or the outliers, or the multicollinearity. Haven't done those three. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Haven't done any multivariate normality, so I need to do that next.
Okay. I thought it was just the one. We did this right here, right?
Yeah, during this EFA, yeah.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
So, just in that section.
Cool.
So for the reflective report, do I actually have to look at every single question?
You know what? That's probably an old artifact that shouldn't be in here. Don't worry about it. You don't need to say whether they're reflective or formative because they're all reflective.
Oh, okay.
Otherwise, we wouldn't be using them in EFA.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh.
All right. We're missing one or two. We'll just wait a couple seconds. Today for lunch, I was thinking we'd go to the Wilk, where the bookstore is, the candy store, exactly. and we'll take a walk that way, and maybe we'll take a walk. There are a couple other places I wanted to show you briefly. They'll take 20 minutes. And then if you want, we can walk up to my office. I'd love to show some of you my village and what I'm doing there. Yeah. It's a non-traditional. There we go. It's not that big of an office. That's recording. Not at BYU. You're booted. And we might even see my family. All my daughters coming to the Wilkinson Center today, I think, for lunch. So we're not coordinating, but if we run into them, that'd be cool. Yeah. They're sweeties. All right, we have everybody except Chuck. And I really am hoping to finish everything by lunch or shortly after lunch today, so that after lunch I can just sit with you and plow through whatever questions you have. And usually the participants find that to actually be the more valuable portion of the boot camp, being able to just one-on-one brainstorm with me or fix problems.
Just get back to the earlier thing saying that it's potentially better to use the electric model instead of the parking model.
Yeah.
And then you said we still have to create a parking model for the interaction.
Yeah, so for interactions, it's really hard to do a latent model because in order to do interactions with two latent variables, what you have to do is, let's say they each have 4 indicators. You have to multiply these indicators and then these. So it becomes, what is that, 16 indicators for the interaction. See ya! Oh, it's unlocked. Okay. Okay. All right, so Levon reminded me, I totally forgot to do something before we started these causal analyses. We have to check for multivariate normality. Otherwise, we don't know if our causal effects are meaningful because we might be non-normal. So thank you, Levon. So let's do this. Multivariate normality. We need to check a couple things. One is multicollinearity. Multicollinearity means that multiple predictors are explaining overlapping variance, too much of the same thing. And so we need to identify if there is multicollinearity between our predicting variables. And multivariate outliers, that is to say, are there people in our data set who are very non-normal when it comes to a relationship between two variables? So let's say for everybody in our data set, playfulness increases information acquisition, but for some oddball, it has a negative effect. Well, that's going to change. It's going to pull that beta, that slope, down. And so we want to identify if they're really weird oddballs, or if they're consistent oddballs. And then we're somewhat justified in removing them. The problem with removing an oddball is that they're still part of your population. And you can't say that they're not appropriate simply because they don't match your theory, right? It's like self-fulfilling prophecy sort of things. But there are articles, I think by Cohen and Cook, who say, yeah, you can remove someone if they're this much different. They're just absolutely not part of the same population. So we'll look at that. Let's do multicollinearity first. Let me close SPSS. We're going to open up the new factor score data set. Okay, so that's in the data files here. I'm going to use the bootcamp factor scores data set. You would do this. This is another reason to do a path model. No. This is another reason to extract factor scores rather than always remaining latent, because checking multicollinearity with latent is not possible. So you need to do it with the factor scores. So what we do for multicollinearity, just do a regular linear regression. So where's regression? Regression, linear, right there. Analyze regression linear. And click. And as a dependent variable, there are a couple different ways we could do this. We could do this separately for useful, separately for enjoyment, for each of the endogenous variables. We could do this, or we could say we're really only concerned about the effects on the final dependent variables. We could do it that way. I'm going to do it separate for each, because in my SEM series playlist, I do it aggregated instead of separate. Yeah, SPSS. Gonna go analyze regression. No, you don't have to, but it sure simplifies things. So close all your SPSSs, and that's a lot of S's, and open up the boot camp factor scores, or your whatever your factor scores one was, and then analyze regression linear. And so I'm going to do this the different approach. So the approach I didn't take in my SEM series playlist, I'll do that approach in this boot camp. So we're going to do this on each endogenous variable, which this isn't the approach I took in the SEM series playlist, but either approach will be just fine. So I'm going to do it for each endogenous variable in this case. So useful is predicted by playful and atypical use. So I'll go down to the bottom here, stick useful as my dependent variable. By the way, I coordinated with Kathy. Those of you who are from CASE, she said this is appropriate to do it this way, even though she taught you a slightly different way. Bootcamp, I'm using Bootcamp factor scores. I saved it. It's in the Dropbox folder. Yeah. So you stick your endogenous variable as the dependent. Then you stick your predictor variables as the independent. There's playful and atypical use. And the only thing different that we didn't do before with the linear regression is we're going to add collinearity diagnostics. So in the statistics area, check the box for collinearity diagnostics. And that's going to produce this multi-collinearity table. Collinearity diagnostics that's in the statistics button. There's a bunch of stuff here you can look at. It's pretty fun stuff if you want to explore. But that's the one we're going to look at right now. And hit continue. When you hit OK, it's going to come up with a bunch of stuff, but really we're just interested in this table right here, which I'll copy out so you can see it a little bit bigger. Right there are all your email addresses. There we go. Boy, that really doesn't want to. Okay. What this says, we want to look right here. The VIF and tolerances. The VIF stands for variable inflation factor. That is the extent to which one variable explains the same variance as the other variable. And so we want numbers under 3 ideally. Under 5 is just fine as well. Anything above 5 is a little bit questionable. Anything above 10 is ridiculous. I don't know if those are the technical terms from literature, but there's literature that shows anything above 10 is unacceptable. Less than 10 is acceptable, but less than 5 is better. Less than 3 is ideal. And it's just the inverse of the tolerance. You want the tolerance to be minimized. So, or no, sorry, maximized. You want to maximize tolerance. A tolerance of 1 is great. A tolerance of 0 is intolerant. So you want something above 0.1 in the tolerance. Something below, ideally, 3 in the VIF. Maybe we should write that down.
You're only testing that with multiple variables, with multiple, right? Like you have a single
yeah, you would not do this if you had. You would not do this if you only had one predictor, because there is no opportunity to explain overlapping variance. Yeah. So let's do a couple more of these. We just did this one, useful. Let's now do enjoyment. You do it for each endogenous variable. In this one, we'll have 4 tests. Yeah. So now we'll do, instead of useful, we'll do enjoyment. Same predictors. Yeah. Yeah, we can do that as well. Yeah, and those will each have 3 predictors. Yep. So we found in this one, again, about the same VIFs, no problem. Let's do one of our final predictors, our final dependent variables, like decision quality. And this has more than these 2. It has atypical use, enjoyment, and usefulness.
Should we use playful also then, just because?
You can if you want. It's not directly predicting it though. So it's linear regression.
No, the little chart though.
Oh, the collinearity diagnostics or the coefficients table. Yeah. So for decision quality, I know that's small, so let me copy it out. Still no problem. VIFs all in the 1 range. No problem at all. What if we did have a problem? What do we do? Well, what this is saying is that one of your variables, at least one of your variables, is not very useful because it's not explaining unique variance in the dependent variable. So could you drop that path from, let's say atypical use was not explaining unique variance in decision quality, but it was explaining unique variance in enjoyment. We could drop this path right here because it's useless essentially.
So how would that not show up in the regression weights?
In the regression weights, it should show up as a non-significant path. Yeah, it would show up. Yeah. It's just identifying why. So there are 2 reasons a variable might not have a significant effect on another variable. The first is because it truly has no effect. There is no relationship between those 2 variables. The other reason is there is a relationship, but it is better explained by some other variable. Yeah, that relationship itself is better explained by some other variable in the model. Yeah, and in that case, VIFs would pick it up. Yeah.
So what do we like your model fit?
Well,
It's not.
if it's excluded, it shouldn't affect your model fit too bad. Yeah. If it's included, it shouldn't hurt it too much. Yeah.
You just go really quick and run through the mechanism.
Yeah. I'll do one more. So let's do information acquisition. We're going to go to Analyze, Regression, Linear Regression. And then as the dependent variable, use our endogenous variable. In this case, it's going to be information acquisition. Oops, I had information acquisition there. Oops. There we go. That is correct, right? Infoac is our dependent variable. And then the predictors are useful, playful, and enjoyment. Not atypical use. So useful, playful, and enjoyment.
Are you testing this with multi-collinearity?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you're doing it against your dependent variable, I mean, that's your model.
Yes.
So would you expect to have an effect with the dependent?
We would definitely expect to see effects on the dependent variable, but what we're looking at is the collinearity issues, not the regression weights.
Yeah. Oh. I thought in this procedure, you really are just estimating independent variable. Oh, no.
This is a regression and will produce betas, but we're not even looking at the betas in this case. We're just looking at the collinearity diagnostics. The other button you push is up in statistics, collinearity, continue, and then OK. And there are the VIFs in the coefficients table. Cool.
If we say this, it doesn't keep the selections on.
That's cool too. Huh? What?
So when we say this file, it doesn't keep the selections that you made.
No, it doesn't keep those selections. Yeah. I just noticed this. Never noticed this before. There's a collinearity diagnostics table. This will tell you the importance of the predictors. So in this case, the first predictor, which was, is that right? Oh no, I won't speak out loud. Never mind. The eigenvalue tells you the value of a predictor, but it's not lining up with the predictors we included. So, oh well.
So the VIF.
The VIF should be less than 3, ideally. Less than 5 is fine. Less than 10 at most. More than 10 is no good. If you have more than 10, then there's a collinearity issue. The VIF.
Just so I get the language in a collinear means it's too many variables explain too many things.
Collinearity means there are some variables that are not uniquely explaining variance. Their relationship with the dependent variable is sort of subsumed by another variable. Now, I wonder if I have a slide on that.
Would you go back and remove factors from the original model from the structure of
From the beginning? No. No. Because, let's say, for example, we did have a VIF problem with playful and information acquisition, but not with playful and decision quality. We can't remove that variable, but we might remove that one path. Although if we retain that path, it's not making much of a difference. The only thing it's doing is possibly inflating the R-square unnecessarily. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, to report this, if you had no problems, say we ran linear regression with collinearity diagnostics, and our VIFs were all less than 3. Yeah. If you wanted to, you could put that table in an appendix. I would never stick that table in the main body. Yeah. Parsimony in all reports. Okay. Okay, so that's collinearity, multicollinearity. The other multivariate normality issue we need to discuss is outliers, which are influential. So in SPSS again, you're going to go to, I think it's linear regression again. My brain just stopped. Linear regression, save, yeah, woohoo. Okay, linear regression, save button, and you're going to save Cook's distance. Cook's distance is the extent to which a row in your data set is abnormally different from everyone else in the data set. So it's the distance from the pack, essentially. So that's in linear regression, save Cook's distance. And hit continue. When you save something like that, it just creates a new variable in your data set. So we want to know for which relationships. You could painstakingly test every relationship in your model. That doesn't sound like fun. Or you could test just on the final dependent variables, which is what I'd like to do. So here's information acquisition. Let me throw in all those things that predict it. Here we are, same as these 3. Let's see if, when we save Cook's D, we have any oddballs. If we go back to the data set, we'll see that Cook's D has been saved. Q1, I think it's called. There's Q1. This is the Cook's distance. If we want, we could just sort this, sort descending, and we see the big ones. We could also plot this. Graphs, chart builder. We want a scatter plot, just a simple one. And we throw Cook's D as the y-axis, and then you can do case number if you wanted as the x-axis, and then hit OK. Are you following along? Should I have slowed down for that? Sorry. I'll do it twice. What this does is it produces a graph that shows you where the oddballs are. So the cutoff is, yeah, that's every case. Every single case. With regards to the effects on information acquisition, here are the oddballs. These 2 guys right here. Now the cutoff is actually 1, a Cook's D of 1. You can see our Cook's D here is 0.1. There are no oddballs in this group. But you might also say, well, these guys are really outside the pack, so if I had to cut somebody, it'd be them. But again, when it comes to multivariate normality issues, it's hard to justify someone not matching your theory being worthy of execution. You can't just chop off heads because they don't match your theory. Yeah, so we're going to do it again. Let's do it again. Let's do it for decision quality. So we're going to go to, did you save Cook's D already? We're actually going to go back to that also. I'm going to do it real quick, though, for decision quality. So in linear regression, as your dependent variable, decision quality, our predictor, instead of playful, it was atypical use. And these two. Saving cooks D. Hit OK. It saves that new cooks variable. I go to Graphs, Chart Builder, and then I want a scatter plot, just a simple scatter plot. And then instead of that, let me get rid of that. On the y-axis, I want that new variable. For me, it's cooks2. And on the x-axis, I can either use the case number that was generated during my imputation from the CFA, or I could go all the way back up to the ID and use that as my x-axis. And hit OK. And this plots the oddballs. Again, the highest cooks D is at 0.06. That's so low. No justification there for removing these guys. So I would not remove anyone based on multivariate normality issues. What would I report? I'd say I did a multivariate normality test on both of our final dependent variables, and all cooks D's were less than whatever it was. In this case, 0.6 or 0.1, which is far below the threshold of 1. So we didn't remove anyone due to multivariate normality issues. Okay. That's multivariate outliers and influentials. Any questions about that? You could, if you wanted to report those graphs, sort of a powerful way to show that there really was no one that was too odd. Did mediation, and now moderation. Okay. Any other questions about mediation? Also, I have one for you. What if you have a model that looks like, that looks like this? Yes, save, please. Grab this data. What if you have a model that looks like this? Enjoyment affects usefulness, affects playfulness, affects decision quality. This is not uncommon at all. How do you test mediation in such a case? Well, using the new tool, it's actually not that hard. Oops, cancel. Name unobserved. There we go. Okay. So what if I want to say enjoyment has a mediated effect on playfulness, usefulness mediated on decision quality? Yeah, you could do that. Just name this A and this B. Parameter A. And this one B. Same idea. And it works just fine. And then move those A and B after selecting the correct estimand. That's it. Yeah. Yeah, we could also have, let me move these. See, we could also have it like this, where there is a direct effect here, and here, and here. Right? That looks kind of cool. Yeah. So yeah, even if we had a model like this, this is called serial mediation. You can test those still just with the A and the B. Same process. Okay. Moderation. Present online. What? Just click on cancel. There we go. Moderation logic. So the effect from one variable onto another is changed because of some moderator. In this case, autonomy affects job satisfaction. And under what circumstances might that relationship be strengthened or dampened? What do you think might be a good moderator for this? Autonomy affecting job satisfaction. Is it different for some type of people? Is it different for some people with certain characteristics or under certain environmental conditions? Age. So who will, as age increases, will that strengthen the positive effect of autonomy on satisfaction or decrease it? As you increase in age, you prefer autonomy. Experience for sure. Yeah. As you're increasing experience, you don't want people to micromanage you at all. You know what you're doing. Yeah. Good. Anything that might dampen that effect? Just the opposites. Yeah. You don't want having an as your boss's unfairness increases. Well, so that directly affects satisfaction. So maybe that's not a good one. You typically don't want a moderator to have a significant direct effect on the dependent variable. Yeah, weird, huh? You want it to be an interactive kind of effect, or a categorical type effect. So we've talked about age and experience. Those are sort of numerically meaningful variables. What if we use a categorical variable? Can you think of any categorical variables that might affect this? Gender, maybe. Maybe males versus females. One likes autonomy more than the other. Who knows? Education. Yeah. Those with low, there might actually be a sort of a U-shaped thing here. Those with no education prefer autonomy. Those with lots of education prefer autonomy. Those with some education know how stupid they are and prefer no autonomy. Just tell me what to do. Yeah. Right? So you get the idea. Things change that relationship. And I like the idea of education again because education might not directly impact satisfaction, but it does change the relationship. Okay. Here's another example. As quality of sleep at night increases, your focus affects your learning more effectively. Hope you all got some sleep last night. My daughter slept last night. It was great. I slept. You didn't? No, I'm sorry. Those are rough days. I think back to the days before I had kids. I slept so well. It was amazing. Took that for granted. I haven't slept right in like 11 years. Okay. The way you model these conceptually is the same. When you're putting up your conceptual model in your paper, you just draw a line from another variable to your line. In Amos, you can't do this. You can't draw a line from a variable to a line. It doesn't work. To model it in Amos, if you're doing the multi-group approach, sort of the gender, the education, the categorical moderators, you just conduct two different models and compare those models. One for one group, one for another group. With interactions, you multiply the moderator by the predictor and then have them all regress. The moderator, the interaction, and the predictor all regress on the dependent variable. So we'll do both of these. And how to do it. This has been a point of contention with many, many instructors. We have resolved this morning, actually. That we resolved on an approach until I hear back from them again. How do you test it? You do a chi-square difference test on each path. No, I need to change that. On the model at large. And then you can test individual paths if there is a model-wide difference. If there's no difference at the model level, there's no need to test individual paths for differences. It's sort of a global versus local test again. If there's not a significant enough difference at some path that it's going to affect the model, then it's not significant enough to look into because it hasn't passed this global threshold. So let's do it. Let's test this right here with the moderator gender. Let me go back to that path. No, don't save that. There we go. So we were testing this model. Let me get rid of the A and the B. Yeah.
I heard you say that if they're not different on the model level,
then there's no reason to go into the paths. Different schools of thought on this. I still think it'd be cool to see which paths are different.
I was going to say that's what we did in our class.
Right. So
we still went on and said, well, there may still be a difference on a certain path.
Right. And so the guru, the authority of authorities on this, said that, well, if I understood him correctly, if you don't pass the global test of a chi-square on the model, then even if you do find a path that is different, it's meaningless because it didn't affect the model enough to make it different. Yeah. So it's this whole global versus local again. even if you have a significant p-value on a path, if you don't have model fit, it's meaningless. That's the idea behind it. If you don't have, even if you have a significant difference on a path, if the model's not different, it's
On
meaningless.
that model, but in the future, you may break out that relationship.
Yeah.
and study it.
So I think as a post hoc analysis, it'd be useful. Say we know we didn't achieve invariance at the model level, but in future research, focus might want to be placed on these three paths, which we did find differences on. Yeah. Okay. And again, I'm still waiting to hear back from certain individuals on that. In this model, you want to delete the estimand parameter constraints that we had, the A and the B. Also, you want to stop estimating that estimand. So down in the bottom left, click on that and say, do not estimate any user-defined estimands. Sorry, my big head's in the way. So just click on that and do not estimate. Otherwise, it's going to expect an A and a B, and it won't run. Okay. The next thing is to create two groups to compare and contrast. So to do that, go to group number 1. Just double-click that. We did this already for invariance. Group number 1, rename that as male in this case, and then new female, and close. And go give them their data. We've done this before. Go find the data for female. And give them group variables. In this case, it's gender. And grouping values, 1 for male, 2 for female. And then I'll wait a few minutes just to make sure everybody's caught up. We've done this before. Create the two models, give them their data, assign them their values. For the invariance test, it's the same thing. Yeah. Especially if you're doing a latent model, yeah, just pull that up and then draw the regression lines as they should be. Throw in the controls, and then you have it. Yep. Yeah, our theory is about a single path, but if I understand correctly, if we don't achieve model difference, then the path doesn't matter. Which path is causing the problem, right? And then we moved back up to the model-wise test, and it passed. Yeah. So we're always going back to that global test.
Now, with that condition, our path model is not going to be globally.
Okay. I'm so glad you brought this up. Okay. So we are doing a structural invariance test right now, right? In the measurement model, the CFA, we did a measurement invariance test. We want the measurement to be invariant. We want it to be the same across groups, so that we know that playful for males is the same as playful for females. But the structural paths, like from playful to useful, we want those to be different. Not the same. We want those to be invariant. No, not invariant. Oh. If you're theorizing it, yeah. But yeah, if you're theorizing moderation, you want to see a difference. Yeah. Whereas in the measurement level, you don't want to see a difference. Yeah. Okay. So we have this set up. Now there are multiple ways to go about this. I'm going to show you one of those multiple ways. See this crowd down here? Yeah. This crowd right here by the printer. We're going to click on that, multi-group analysis. You can also, I think, go to Analyze and multiple group analysis. Click on that and hit OK. And hit OK again. It's just going to constrain stuff for you. And boom, it constrains everything. And then it creates multiple models as well. We're going to look at these models. Let me double-click structural residuals. We do not need to test for invariance between structural residuals, so I'm going to delete this model. Structural covariances. Nope, don't need this one. Structural weights, yes, those are the regression weights. We want those to be compared. Now notice for males, this path is called B1_1. For females, it's called B1_2. In my, where'd it go? Bother. In here, we're forcing as a constraint B1_1 must equal B1_2. So we're saying fully constrain this model so that these paths are forced to be equal. And then we'll do a chi-square difference test between this fully constrained model and an unconstrained model. We probably should have done the unconstrained model first. Oops. Okay. So run this. Oh, there's an unconstrained model right here. Cool. Let's run this. And go to the output. And here's the unconstrained model. Chi-square is 24, degrees of freedom is 8. And then the constrained model, 41 and 21. So going to go do actually it creates a chi-square difference test for you. If you go to model comparisons, this is a chi-square difference test between those two models. Here's the p-value. This means there are no differences between these two models at the global level. They are invariant, meaning even if we find a path that is significantly different across the two groups, it doesn't affect the models sufficiently to be called moderated, supported moderation. But let's say this p-value was significant. We could then go test a path by path. Let's do that real quick. So the path we wanted to know about, I didn't write hypotheses for it. Which path do you think we ought to test? One way to check. Oh, you also have to test model fit, obviously. 983, still good. Okay. If we go to estimates, scalars, regression weights, and male versus female, we can see which paths are changing the most. So 3 to 2, big change. 0.3, 0.8, probably not even significant either way. Not a big change to the next one. Bigger change to the next one. Quite a big change, probably not significant for that one. Ooh, info-act and useful. Useful info-act, that's a pretty big jump. I could just put this in Excel and find the biggest difference if I wanted. But, yeah.
If you control for gender,
yeah.
this would alleviate this issue.
Controlling for gender versus multi-group moderating by gender. First off, don't do both, because then your model won't run. But controlling for it is very different from theorizing about it. If you control about it, you're just accounting for the potential effects of gender. If you're theorizing about it, you're trying to identify those effects. Yeah. Let's try to see if this one's different. Usefulness to information acquisition. Here's usefulness, information acquisition, B2_2. So in my structural weights, what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove everything except B2_2. That's B1 and B2. There it is, B2_2. I'm going to cut and paste this at the bottom, and then I'm going to cut everything else out with Control X. So now the only constraint we have is B2_2 and B2_1. And hit close. So I got rid of every constraint except the one constraint. Everything else is freely estimated. Close that, run it. Look at the chi-square difference test. Model comparison. Hey, look at that. Significant difference. But again, local level significance, global level non-significance. So I would report this in my discussion area. Say, hey, we did find a path that was different, even though at the global level there was no difference. No.
If you think about it, we can't say that gender
Moderates that path? I would love to say that. Let me check something really quick. See if somebody emailed me back about it.
So was all that in the video?
Almost. Nope, no email back. That's unfortunate. Okay. So the new video, the procedure is in there. Yeah, but the talking about global versus local is not in there. Yeah. And there's another way even. That works, but I made an estimand also if you want to name two paths A and B. One, the male path A, the female path B. It'll calculate just like with the mediation. Yeah. Yeah, so let me show you that real quick. Let me close this model without saving. That'd be a pain. Okay. My path initial. Do you want to save? No. Okay, back to where we were. I'm going to really quick recreate these groups, male, female, close, get the data. Okay, so there's another estimand. You get it in the same way, so I'm not going to walk you through that. But it's called, let me go select my estimand. It's called My Group Differences. Open that up. And what it's going to do is, instead of doing an indirect path, you do the same path. Let me double click this and get rid of it real quick. Actually, I'll do the other one. Get rid of this one. Okay. So if I double click this path here, this usefulness to information acquisition, right now I'm on the female side, the female model. I want to uncheck all groups and now call this A. So that if I go to the male side, you'll see it's called B, female A, and now the estimand is going to calculate the difference between those two groups. You have to bootstrap in order to do this estimand, just like with the indirect effects. But it produces estimate, scalars, user-defined. There's the difference. If I go to here, it says that effect is not significantly different. Huh. So the chi-square test, did we do it on that path for the chi-square test? Maybe it was a different path. It was enjoyment to useful, wasn't it? So let me just see if it gives us the same thing. Enjoyment to, no, it could have been enjoyment to useful. Which path did we do? I can't remember. It was enjoyment to decision quality. Let me just try this real quick. Useful to decision quality? That sounds right. Okay. Let's go over here and get rid of A. Oops. A, and for male, call it B, and run it again. See if we get a significant difference. No, it couldn't have been this one. It was some other path. Dang it. Oh well. Regression weights. Wasn't it that one right there? Yeah, it was useful to information acquisition. Useful to information. That's the one we tried, and it wasn't significant using this approach. Huh. So use the other approach. More liberal. Okay. Who knew? So the chi-square approach that I showed you, that'll work. Okay. That's multi-group differences. I think we can finish interactions before lunch. That'd be great. Unless there are questions on multi-group. Okay. Interactions, the very last thing on the list. Whew. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, multi-group moderators. Yes. We use gender as the multi-group moderator.
I was looking here, but I didn't.
So this is a question I often get. What if I have more than two groups in my multi-group moderator? The human brain can't actually compare more than two things at the same time. We don't have math that can do that either. We don't think in more than that many dimensions. And so you would have to do A to B, B to C, A to C, or A versus BC, or B versus AC, or C versus AB. So you're still just comparing two things at a time. You couldn't do A, B, C comparisons because that's working in multiple dimensions, and our brain just doesn't function that way. Okay. And our tools don't do it either. Yeah, that's right. I never know. Let's see if we're all right online. What is a good range for R-square for publication? Asks Fabiano. A good range for R-square, it depends on your field. So in my field, information systems, it's behavioral science. Well, a lot of it is. We would like something at a minimum above 0.1, so 10% of the variance explained. But ideally above 0.25. In other fields, like finance, you're thrilled if you get above a 0.04. You're explaining 4% of profit? Heck yeah, I'd like to know, right? In other fields, like physics, if you're not explaining 99%, you know, you're sunk. In medicine, you want to explain all the variance with medicine, or else you're killing people. So it really depends on your field. Okay. Interactions. For interactions, we're going to test this model here. Play times experience and atypical use times experience. So that's our original model. If we go back up to wherever that was here. Nope, didn't include it. Oh well. We're going to test a model. Play and atypical use times experience. So to do that, you need to do some prep. In SPSS, you first must go to Analyze, Descriptives, and what we're going to do is we're going to standardize all the variables going into these interactions. So, Analyze, Descriptives, and we're going to get those two predictor variables, which were playful and atypical use, and our moderator, which was it experience? Experience, yep. Experience is up here somewhere. Here's experience. Throw those in there. And we're going to save, check that box for save standardized values as variables. So that's just going to subtract the mean from the current value. It's going to mean center it, and then normalize it to have a standard deviation of 1. So it's just a standardized variable. Hit OK. And when you do that, the next thing you want to do is transform compute variable. Already standardized through factor scores. So I don't think the factor scores are standardized, but that's a good question. Because you don't want to standardize a standardized variable, because that'll just mess things up. I don't know. I don't know if the factor scores we imputed are standardized. Okay, so if they are standardized, we don't want to standardize at this point. We'd want to standardize only frequency, experience. So are you confident on that? They can be outside of 1, that's fine. If they're centered around 0. There's an easy way to find out. Let's do this. I'm glad you brought this up. So analyze descriptives, and let me not save those as standardized, but let me in my options show me the mean, yep, and standard deviation. There we go. And let me hit OK. Experience should be wild, but oh, they are standardized. So you can see your mean is 0. They've been mean centered, not standardized, but it's going to do a similar thing, and so we don't want to re-standardize a mean centered variable. Sorry? Would it smooth it more? I don't know. Okay, so what I'm going to do is only standardize experience and then multiply. Yeah, because it's not standardized yet.
But if you score experience before?
Sorry?
Yeah. No, never mind.
Okay. Okay, so transform compute variable. We're going to do play underscore times underscore experience. And we're going to use not these two that we calculated for play and atip. We'll use playful, the imputed factor score, times z experience. Excuse me. Is the one we standardized. Yeah. The other z's we shouldn't have standardized though. Those it sounds like, because they were already mean centered through our factor scores. I'm not going to use those z's. Yeah. Which is different from my SEM series playlist. I need to go back and change that. Dang it. Okay. Hit OK. That's going to create a new variable for us. We're going to do the same thing for, instead of playful, we're going to do atypical use. wherever it went, ATIP use times Z experience, and call it ATIP times experience.
You're creating two interactive variables.
Two interaction variables.
Independent variable that you want to
Moderate the effect of. Yeah, so the interactions are to show that they can move together holistically, like have a multiplicative effect on some endogenous variable. Just the direct effects, yeah. So hit OK. And we should have two new variables at the end of the data set here. Yeah, I'll throw those in now. So you got to save this, and then over in Amos, change the data set. I'm not going to use male and female anymore. I'm going to go back to my original path. Cancel. Let me save as. File save as. Yeah, I'm going to go back to the original path model. Okay. Here we go. Get rid of these estimands, or these parameter constraints. Uncheck the estimands. Do not define estimand. Okay. So we're going to pull in that new data set. Which, not the new one, but the one we've been using, because we saved it again in SPSS. And it should now have those new variables, those two new variables at the bottom. Play times experience and ATIP times experience. And I want to see what their effects are on these various variables. I think in our model we actually only did it to experience, or useful, sorry. There we go. And now we need to covary them, because they're exogenous. And with frequency. So, we have two new exogenous variables, the interaction terms. They're only regressing with useful. And this will essentially tell us, oh, and I need to bring in experience itself. Forgot one. That's what our model said. We were only moderating that path. Those paths. In our model, I guess this one tests all of them. Our original model didn't, so I'll bring in all of them. That's fine. No, the model we're saying we're testing here says both, but in our original model it said just on usefulness. Oh well. Now they're both in. We also need to bring in experience itself. We can use Z or regular experience. It actually won't make any difference. Yeah. Same regressions. Covary all those. Right, not one we're theorizing about, but one that is needs to be accounted for because we're using its interaction. Correct, we're not going to the dependent variables because I'm not theorizing that one. Yeah, if I'm theorizing that this interaction could have an effect on the dependent variable, then I need to include lines there. But I wasn't theorizing that. I was just theorizing it would affect these mediators.
Okay, but if you're theorizing that it affects the direct effect, then you wouldn't include that mediation. I mean, you would include that mediation.
I could include the mediators still. Yeah, or I could. It's so I can account for their variance. Yeah, you can do it all at the same time. I'm not theorizing mediation right now, but the mediators are present so I can account for their variance that they explain. Let me file save as interaction path interaction. Okay. Run this. Look at model fit. Because if we don't have good model fit, then whatever we find is meaningless. Look, we still have good model fit. Woohoo! Oh, and now go look at the interactions. So estimates, scalars, standardized regression rates, actually regular regression rates, excuse me. And here are those interactions right here. And the answer is none of them are significant. That is very common to have no significant interactions. I'm not surprised. Just period. It's very common to not find significant interactions.
But this has to be hypothesized.
We would theorize about it, yeah. Have a hypothesis that says that experience strengthens the positive relationship between atypical use and usefulness. And the answer is no, it doesn't. Not in this context. Now, if we wanted, we could go delete these one at a time and see if it has some effect, see if one of the interactions is still significant.
Can you go to the notification and please?
Yeah, sure. Nothing major.
So the model fit,
The model fit was fine.
but they are not significant.
There's just no significant interactions. So the answer is hypothesis not supported.
But if model fit is bad, and the interaction is significant,
Still no good, because there's some better explanation. So you can try to adjust for model fit, and then test your moderation hypothesis. Yeah. Let me.
One more.
Yeah.
Would that be possible to infer from the CFA? No, because there is no.
Not really. Yeah, we are not including interactions in the CFA. Let's delete these a couple at a time. See, play times experience on enjoyment. Let's get rid of that one. See if it has any effect. Play experience on enjoyment. Run it. See if it frees up anything. Estimates. Interactions still not significant. So, a tip on enjoyment. Run it again. I doubt we'll find anything here. Estimates, still not significant. Finally get rid of this altogether. Run it. Estimates, not significant. Pretty close. Let's pretend this was significant.
Why you didn't draw a line to change? I know that it was a discussion with Charles. Why not to put the direction with the dependent variables?
Because I didn't theorize about it, but we certainly could. Sure. Yeah, we can throw those lines in there. I unfortunately need to. You know what? I'll just leave. I'll do it with this one. Okay. So here and run and observe. Estimates. Scroll down, and the interaction on decision quality not significant. On information acquisition not significant. Unuseful, it's close. Let me go plot it. Let's pretend this was significant. Let's go plot it. So in the stats tools package, there is an interaction plotter. Yep, two-way interactions, and it even interprets it for you. Yeah. Okay, let me pull up this and shrink. Okay. So this assumes unstandardized estimates. So our DB in this case is useful. Our moderator is experience, and our independent is ATIP, and dependent is useful. Okay. The effect of the independent variable, atypical use, on useful is ATIP on useful is 0.027. Again, the unstandardized 0.027. The moderator's effect, that is experience, is on useful nothing, zero effect, 0. And then the interaction effect is negative 0.046, negative 0.046. You can see there's very little effect. If I go back over here, very, very little effect. And it interprets it for you. It says experience dampens the positive relationship between atypical use and useful. But really, it doesn't do anything because this isn't a significant interaction. But let's pretend it was a significant interaction. Call this a -2. Not 2, 0.2, sorry. -0.2. There we go. Then you can see, there's clearly an interaction going on. These are different slopes. And you can just copy and paste this text. That is the interpretation of the graph. Okay. And what would you report? You report this graph. You'd also report that effect. In this case, -0.2 is the effect from the interaction.
Typically, you would have drawn this correlation only if you already had a causal relationship independent. So you're bringing an additional concern. This relationship can be moderated, right?
So you can actually throw in interactions even if there is no significant direct effect between the IV and the DV, because you may say, well, alone it has no effect, but when it's combined with this moderator, the effect becomes present. It emerges. Yeah, so it's possible to have even without a significant direct effect. Yeah.
In many of our classes, it was recommended as we went throughout some of these processes to trim insignificant paths before we test some of these things, but I haven't seen us.
We haven't been trimming much, yeah. So the problem with trimming non-significant paths is that those are usually paths you're still theorizing about. So you report their terminal effect and then move on. You could do that. The only issue is you're no longer accounting for their effects, even however small they are. So the only time I would do that is if I were hurting for degrees of freedom and didn't have model fit.
Right. That's the only time we were doing it before, too.
Okay.
To achieve model fit.
Okay. Yeah. Then that's the only way I'd argue it. Yeah.
So you keep it in because it's not having a big effect on the model.
But you're still accounting for its variance. Yeah.
And there's no impact on your model fit. Just your hypothesis says it's not significant.
Yeah, there's not a supported hypothesis.
But as you kept checking your model fit throughout this process and it was good, in many cases
I didn't need to change anything.
right, but in many cases it's not good.
And in that case, you may need to free up a degree of freedom, yeah, by deleting a non-significant path. Okay. That's interactions. And controls we talked about. We talked about the logic behind including controls. These are examples of controls that are fun. I include them. We talked about it. Oh, I should talk briefly about categorical controls. What if you have a control that's categorical, like marital status or position, title, or region of the world or something like that? You can't just throw that variable into an Amos path model because it's going to assume normal regression. But you can't do a normal regression from a categorical variable to some other variable. It doesn't make any sense because it's going to say, well, to what extent does the movement upward in numeric values of this categorical variable coincide with the movement of some real numerical variable? And it makes absolutely no sense. I don't have more marital status than you, or more religion than you, or more region than you. That makes no sense at all. So what you have to do is actually split up those categorical variables into dummy variables, which are binary presence variables. So let's say we have three regions: region Americas, region Europe, Africa's, region Asia's, and we want to include that as a control. What we'd have to do is create a new variable for region Americas, where a value of 1 represents yes, we are from the Americas. A 0 says no, we're not from the Americas. You're one of those other two. In Europe, we'd have a new variable that says, yes, I'm from the Europe, Africa region, 1, 0 for everyone else. So for those three variables, you would only ever have, for one of the rows, they would only have a 1 in one of those three new variables. The other two values would be a 0, because they're either in the North America, or the Americas, or they're in the Europe, Africas, or they're in the Asias. They're not in more than one. They belong to one of those groups. And then you include those three dummy variables as predictors. in your model. Questions about that? Just don't use categorical dummies, or don't use categorical controls. Another way to do it is to run an ANOVA on the dependent variables. Let's say you want to control again for region. You'll see its effect on firm performance. Do an ANOVA, where firm performance is the variable of interest and region is the factoring variable, and see if there's any significant difference between those groups. If there's not, you can say there is no confounding effect here. Don't need to include it as a control.
So in the top one, you have 3D variables.
Yeah, 3 binary variables that represent presence or absence of a characteristic or trait. Yeah. Gender is special because it's binary, usually. Yeah. If you have a binary categorical variable, it's already a dummy variable. In this case, we say gender is male and female, but if we're treating it like a dummy, male is currently 1, female is 2. We'd have to swap those so it's a 1 and a 0, where it's no longer gender, it's male. Are you male or are you not male, i.e. female, right?
So in your gender, you included in the model 0, 1, 4.
That's actually 1 and 2. So if I were going to include that as a control variable that has a regression involved, I'd have to switch that to a 1 and 0. Yeah. Sort of. Actually, it should work with 1 and 2. As long as it's just 2 numbers that are 1 apart, it should be the same, no problem. Yeah, they still just indicate presence and absence of a characteristic. Yeah. Yes? And you'd still covary those dummies with all other exogenous variables. Yeah.
You don't have a, is there a start to the package way to create a correlation matrix?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, did we not do the correlation matrix for the causal model? Oh, well, so the causal model's correlation matrix is actually created during the CFA. It's that one we created with MSV and CR and AVE. That is the correlation between the factors. Yeah. So you can just include that as your correlation matrix.
What file is that?
The stats tools package?
No, for the correlation.
Yeah, it's the validity master in the stats tools package. This thing, the validity master, creates your correlation matrix between your factors. And so those are the factors you're going to go on and use in your causal model. So that's the correlation matrix for the variables in your causal model.
Can we use it for every single item, or we just with this whole one?
No, so this one, when you're doing it, it's with the CFA. It's every item. But the correlation matrix you're including is just at the factor level. You're not going to do a correlation matrix for the items. That'd be a massive correlation matrix. Yeah, you wouldn't do that.
This is a correlation matrix you report in the paper.
Yeah, just the one produced during the validity master test. Yeah. This is the newest new. I updated it twice last week because the variances column is missing. Yeah, because of various reasons. This is the accurate calculation. Yeah. Turns out the variances aren't needed if you have unstandardized items. Only works when you have standardized items, which we typically don't use. Yeah. Anything else before lunch? Okay, so here's my plan. We finished everything before lunch. Oh, also email me if you want a certificate of completion. If you do not email me, you will not get a certificate of completion. You don't all need certificates of completion. So only email me if you need one or want one for some reason. Huh?
Something silly. Does this account for the
Do you get course credit? So we used to offer credit actually to the students who attended. Give them 1 credit hour for this. Yeah, but then they'd have to pay for it. So we stopped doing that. They'd rather just have it for free. So this afternoon, I am going to just work one-on-one with people. Yeah, I think I just work one-on-one with people. So if, like remote folks, if you don't want to come back this afternoon, that's cool. If you want me to contact you this afternoon, email me and we'll make it happen. But I won't be recording a video this afternoon. Yes, Dino, I will respond to those emails. And then make sure you email me if you want a certificate of completion, even if you are remote, that's fine. Yes, and that should do. That should do. Cool. We made it through the boot camp. Any final questions, online folks? Okay. Here we go.